Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for taking the time to watch this recording with both Giles, Lindsay and myself, where Giles will be drawing on his own experiences and expertise around the subject of embedding ESG and sustainability into your organisation. Now, before we get going, for those that don't know me, my name's Danny Wrigglesworth. I am the Managing Director and Founder here at DJR. And as mentioned, I'm joined today by Giles Lindsay. Again, for those of you that don't know Giles, I'll do my best to fill in a few blanks for you. Giles is a technology executive, an award-winning business agility coach and CEO of Agile Delta Consulting Limited. Giles is also the president of the Business Agility Institute for the UK chapter. He has a proven track record in delivering digital transformation and technological leadership. He has adeptly scaled high-performing delivery teams across various industries, from startups to leading enterprises. His roles from CIO or CTO to visionary change agent have always centered on defining overarching technology strategies and aligning them with organizational objectives. Giles is a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute, the FCMI, the BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, the FBCS, and the Institution of Analysts and Programmers, the FIAP. His leadership across both the UK and global technology companies have consistently fostered innovation, growth, and adept stakeholder management. With a unique ability to demystify intricate technical concepts, he's also enabled better ways of working across multiple organizations. His commitment now extends to the literary realm with his recently published book, which you can see in the background, Clearly Agile, which is a leadership guide to business agility. That came out in March last year, 2024, and went on to be #1 in the Amazon Business Book Chart. So that's to be applauded. Very well done for that, Giles. This book focuses on embracing agile principles to effect transformative change in organizations. An ardent advocate for continuous improvement and innovation, Giles is dedicated to creating a business landscape that prioritizes value, inclusivity, and societal advancement. I don't think I've missed anything out, have I, Giles?
I think you've done a great job there, Danny.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the way this will work today is as follows. And of course, we'll try and get through as much as we can, but we hope to cover the following. Giles will talk about embedding ESG and sustainability into your organization. So look, as we all know, embedding ESG and sustainability practices is vital for organizations that aim to thrive responsibly and create lasting impact. So during this conversation, we'll explore actionable strategies for integrating ESG principles across various business areas. We'll also talk about how you can build a culture prioritizing environmental and social responsibility and therefore enable leadership to drive sustainable initiatives. So that's quite a lot for us to cover, but we'll try and keep it to around 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and I'm sure I'll have a couple of questions to ask at that point, if that's okay, Giles.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Amazing. So without further ado, let's crack on. Giles, over to you.
All right. Well, thanks, Danny, for having me on this. I really appreciate it. And I always love when the two of us get together to have a chat on one of these little topics. So thank you. ESG, something that I am passionate about and something that I think we have to be aware of as we start embracing AI in our lives, especially in our work lives. So let's go back to some of the basics, right, on this. You mentioned, Danny, in the intro a bit about, what ESG is. Well, for me and for everyone at home, it's always stands for environmental, social, and governance. And it is this framework, this holistic framework that's used to assess a company's impact beyond things like financial performance, being able to focus on things like sustainability, ethical responsibility, corporate governance. So let's have a look. E, environmental. That covers off things like how a business manages its carbon footprint, for example, its energy use, its impact on natural resources as well. And that might include things like climate strategies, having to deal with emission reductions, sustainable supply chains you might be working with as well, as an example. S, social. Now that focuses on the people, right? And that's all around employee well-being, diversity and inclusion, ethical labor practices as well, and how an organization actually interacts with the local communities. It also includes the things like we all see anyway with GDPR, data privacy, customer trust, corporate social responsibility. All of those things are included in this as well. And then we get into G, governance. Now, this is where we ensure that the companies we are part of actually run with integrity. They have proper transparency and, probably more importantly than anything else, proper accountability. And this covers such things like leadership ethics, executive pay, shareholder rights, compliance and regulations, and those kind of areas as well. So, ESG, a lot of people think it's just all about compliance. It isn't. It's actually quite a lot around resilience as well, which is really important for modern businesses. Investors, customers, and employees actually now expect businesses to operate responsibly. Only go back a number of years ago, and we know so many that we could talk about that didn't. Companies with strong ESG strategies often see higher investor confidence as well. They lower regulatory risk by following the practices, and more often than not, they end up with a stronger long-term performance. So, in short, ESG is no longer a nice to have. It is actually a proper business necessity.
Yeah, interesting. So who in your opinion should be leading the charge on ESG in your particular organization?
Great question, Danny. Who should lead the charge on ESG? I personally believed it should be a shared approach. Yeah, there's going to be one or two key leaders, but I really do think ESG has cross-functional responsibility across the entire organization. And that even includes buy-in from the boardroom all the way through to the daily operating capabilities of the business as well. Everyone, I believe, is responsible. Yes, there are people like the CEO and the board who set that strategic tone, but I think the actual looking after this on a daily basis probably relies heavily on key things like IT, finance, HR, compliance. And so probably if there was one person who had to sort of be at the forefront, even though accountability and responsibility is shared across so many different parts, it's probably going to be the CIO. ESG.
For what reason do you think?
Well, ESG increasingly relies today on things like technology for data collection, automation, and a huge amount of reporting that goes with it, right? So AI, cloud, data center strategies have a direct impact on things like carbon footprints and energy consumption, right? So CIOs are already overseeing that level of digital transformation, embedding ESG across those kinds of capabilities where technology is being used. Therefore, I think the role has to be, the CIO, who must be at the forefront of this as well. But they're not alone. And this is where I think there possibly is a bit of a paradigm shift in some of the modern roles we have in technology companies as well. Another one for me is enterprise architecture. Those enterprise architects as well. I think they're a key enabler, because you need a well-defined enterprise architecture in your organization to ensure ESG is integrated properly and can become part of business process. See, not just an afterthought where someone in the C-suite or the board or the executive team suddenly comes in and says, we must add on all of this extra capability to report on ESG and look after it properly in our organization, right? So with that, IT leaders, these enterprise architects, they can implement hopefully sustainable AI, for example, energy efficient infrastructure, looking for those organizations that actually operate that way, and hopefully responsible data storage practices as well. So, CIOs should be collaborating with people like these enterprise architects, possibly even CFOs, to help align ESG with the sort of technical and the business goals as well. And I don't think it stops there, because I think there, as I mentioned at the start, I think there also needs to be a level of accountability at the board level as well. And so a level of education for boards of directors needs to happen, because they've got to provide oversight over all of this, and they need to ensure that, you know, ESG practices that they are starting to adopt align with risk practices, align with governance, align with also the business's financial performance. So, you know, we should be seeing going forward ESG strategies, ESG information being embedded in annual reports, shareholder communication, compliance frameworks, etc., etc. And then lastly, the actual reporting itself. For me, this comes down to, if you've got a chief strategy officer, chief financial officer, someone in that sort of space takes the lead. CIOs like myself, with data officers and enterprise architects and any other risk managers inside the organization, we play a supporting role in ensuring that that data is accurate. But for me, I think it's the role of someone like that chief strategy officer or the chief financial officer who should be dealing with taking the lead on actually providing those types of reports, the annual reports, the shareholder communications, compliance framework updates, etc., etc.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's, you know, it is a full team game, isn't it? You know, if there's a disconnect anywhere between the board, as you mentioned, or anywhere down, you know, then it's going to fail, right?
It becomes just slightly some sort of episodic event that happens in one department or one particular area of the organization, without it actually being led from the very top down and cascading through all the various different departments of an organization. And yeah, okay, it's going to take time, the larger the organization it is, to propagate and get that messaging all the way down through all the levels in the business. But it can be done if you take responsibility and accountability for doing it, and you get the messaging right for all your people.
Yeah, and if you don't, it's doomed for failure, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah. You mentioned you were talking about reporting just a minute ago. Again, in your opinion, what's the risk of not performing any ESG reporting in your organization? What impact do you think that could have?
Firstly, regulatory challenges, legal challenges. You know, we're all seeing today in our businesses ESG regulations being tightened across the UK, right? We're seeing this. It's probably being tightened as we speak across the EU and in other large organizations as well globally. And I think what we'll start seeing is, just like with the data protection and GDPR, failure to comply to these new ESG regulation standards that we're starting to see. I think you'll start seeing fines. I think you'll start seeing penalties. And I think you'll start having things like investors scrutinizing whether they want to be investing in a particular company as well. You know, greenwashing risks, you know, misleading ESG claims and things like that as well can also result in legal and reputational damage at the same time. So I genuinely think we've got to make sure we start tightening up all of these regulations in our organization, just to make sure we don't ever end up with any of these fines or penalties at the end of the day. I also think there's going to be, you'll have things like investor and market pressure as well, because investors, and the bigger the investors, the more they sort of understand these things like ESG. They are becoming increasingly ESG driven. And if your organization is doing no ESG reporting at all, no investment is going to come from those large organizations. Many firms won't do business with companies that lack clear ESG commitments. So, you know, you also have things like ESG ratings actually impacting access to capital, loans, partnerships with other organizations.
And that's the thing now, right?
Oh, it's massive, because that will come up with reputational damage, right? Consumers and employees, as we all know, expect businesses to be socially and environmentally responsible, right? So public scrutiny on these things could potentially lead to things like boycotts, loss of talent, of people not wanting to work in those organizations and going to other responsible organizations elsewhere. And you might even end up with brand erosion as well.
Yeah.
So, there are lots of things to consider. Now, if you start getting inside the organization, you might even end up with things like operational and financial risks, such as, ESG reporting helps businesses actually identify some of those risks earlier. You got to think of supply chain vulnerabilities, energy inefficiencies as well. Okay, so we've got to do better tracking things like carbon footprints, resource usage, and if we don't, companies could face unexpected future costs, carbon taxes, energy price hikes, if they're not all over the top of this and are actually, looking at how to best implement these processes within their organizations. I think lastly, competitive disadvantage is going to be a big thing as well, right? Where organizations work. Firms without ESG reporting may lose out on future contracts. I think that's absolutely clear. And especially that's going to happen if you're dealing with things like the government or
100%.
very large or very large enterprise organizations as well, who have that ethical responsibility.
I think that's only right as well, isn't it? It's interesting you mentioned, or you touched upon, potentially people might lose out on talent. I can tell you now, people will lose out on talent. We're seeing it now already. So, people need to get their ducks in a line here. This isn't
Totally
going away. This is a massive, massive thing. So I would suggest if people haven't got their ducks in a line, then they need to do so forthwith. With it, yeah. So
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So in summary, if we can have 60 seconds, how would you summarize the importance? And again, equally summarize the importance, but equally at what cost if you don't do it, you think?
Yeah, I just think it goes back to my earlier point where I said it can't be any longer one of these nice to haves in your organization. It is going to become a business necessity. Everyone has to play their part. You can't just go and say, CIO, it's your responsibility to do this, or CFO, it's your responsibility to do this.
Yeah.
We've got to be thinking about all of the companies who we work with for data storage and other things, your Azures, your GCPs, your Amazon AWS environments as well. All of these large companies need to also have ethical practices as well. So we need to be considering vetting who we are working with as well to make sure that they've got those practices as much as we have as well. I think back to your point, let's go back to 2000, year 2000, right? Broadband was coming out. You were an employer, an employer of choice to people because you might have had broadband access, which meant they had access to faster internet and things like that.
Sure.
Recently, we've started talking about, and we did in a previous panel discussion, how you need to become an employer of choice if you've got AI in your organization. These school leavers, college leavers, university leavers, they're all going to start having access to AI to do their education. So they will expect, leaving the sort of the education sector, coming into the work sector, that AI is going to be there to support them as well, right? So on top of that, because of that and that challenge, we now need ESG standards to be there as well. I think you'll become an employer of choice because people will actually understand whether you are having ESG policies throughout your organization or not as well.
Yeah, I agree. Amazing, mate. You're a star. Thank you very much for that. For those, for everyone watching, you're probably used to Giles and myself doing a few of these now. If there's anything that you want us to talk about, if there's anything that you want to leverage Giles's expertise on, and he knows a thing or two, can I suggest that you message me through LinkedIn, or indeed message Giles through LinkedIn? The links are available at the bottom of this video. Thank you everybody for watching. Giles, thank you again for your time. It's been brilliant.
Cheers, Danny.
And we'll catch you all again soon. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Thanks.